Welcome to the Hidden Corners, where truth and terror collide. Discover a realm where the lines between the living and the supernatural blur, as you embark on a journey to the paranormal and visit the mysterious hidden corners of your mind.
Welcome to the Wolfman Chronicles. This is Chapter 4 of Book 8, which makes it Episode 94. Cambodia, Ancient Temples. Viktor Kamarov spent a sleepless night pacing his hotel room. The silk rug beneath his feet was worn thin from hours of anxious movement. The city outside, Phnom Penh's usual symphony of mopeds, late-night voices, and distant music, barely registered. His thoughts were consumed by the debacle at the warehouse. His shipment, his property, had vanished. The girls were gone, and his operation had been exposed. It was more than a setback. It was humiliation. And humiliation, in Victor's world, could cost him far more than money. It could cost him influence, control, fear, power. He stopped at the window and he stared out at the city, glittering and oblivious. Somewhere out there, someone had dared to interfere. Someone had crossed him. His jaw clenched. He needed answers. Poured himself another glass of vodka and stared at his reflection in the glass mirror above the table. His face, always cold and controlled, was contorted with masked rage. He threw the glass at the reflection, grabbed his coat, and walked out the door. Jack had waited till after 10 p.m. to call Sasha, stepping out onto the balcony of the room overlooking the pool. Miguel was down there, swimming long laps in the silent water. Nights in Cambodia meant early morning in Alaska, 15 hours apart. But the distance felt so much greater. The line crackled faintly as her voice came through, soft and familiar, and he longed to hold her in his arms. He told her everything, how they had walked through the haunting halls of Tuol Slong, the photographs of terrified faces staring back at them, and how the silence at the killing fields had been deafening in its grief. It was like walking through a cemetery where the souls still hovered. He told her, his voice low, rough with emotion. There was a pause on the line. Then came her question, barely above a whisper. When are you coming home? Well, Jack didn't answer right away. The truth was, he didn't know. The mission had shifted now. After what they'd seen and what they'd experienced, it had taken on a new importance. It felt personal. This place, scarred and resilient, had a way of pulling you in and refusing to let go until you left something of yourself behind. I don't know yet, he finally said, the guilt heavy in his chest. Nadia is determined to stop Viktor Kamarov, and he's here now, in Cambodia. Now, I promised you I'd keep her safe, and I will, until we can both come back home. Sasha didn't press. She just sighed, a soft sound full of longing and worried, and said, okay, just come back to me soon, Jack. That's all I ask. Jack woke to the sound of his phone buzzing on the nightside table. It was Alexei. Kamarov is on the move. He boarded a plane this morning for Siem Reap. We need to go there. It's 5 hours by bus, so I think we should fly. How soon can you be ready? Jack sat up, rubbing the sleep from his eyes as the dull gray of early morning seeped through the curtains. Alexei's voice replayed in his mind. Kamarov is on the move. The name alone was enough to jolt him fully awake. He swung his legs over the side of the bed and reached for his jeans, dialing Nadia's number. Alexei called, Jack said. Kamara's heading to Siem Reap. He boarded a plane this morning. We need to move. Well, she was out of bed before he finished speaking. What's the plan? Well, we don't know yet, but we can't let him disappear. We're going to fly out as soon as we can get to the airport. It's a 5-hour bus ride. Well, we just don't have that kind of time. As Jack finished packing his bag, he shot a text to Alexei. I'll meet you at the airport, and there's 2 more of us. We'll explain when we get there. Well, within 20 minutes, all 4 of them were downstairs, bags slung over their shoulders, adrenaline already coursing through their bodies. The city was just beginning to stir, the smell of strong coffee and fried street food wafting through the air as they climbed into a waiting tuk-tuk. Siem Reap is the second largest city in Cambodia and the capital of the Siem Reap province in northwestern Cambodia. It is the gateway to the ruins of Angkor, the seat of the Khmer kingdom from the 9th through the 15th centuries. Angkor's vast complex of intricate stone buildings included the preserved Angkor Wat, the main temple, which is pictured on Cambodia's flag. Now, Siem Reap was little more than a village when the French explorers came to Angkor in the 19th century and rediscovered the temple ruins. However, European visitors had visited much earlier, but it was the French, beginning in 1901, that took responsibility for clearing and restoring the temples. In that very same year, 1901, the first Western tourists arrived in Angkor, a total of about 200 in just 3 months. Angkor was now known across the world as a tourist destination. Now, Siem Reap began to grow into a bustling large city. In 1975, the population of Siem Reap, like all other Cambodian cities and towns, was driven into the countryside by the communist Khmer Rouge, and its history is now colored by the horror of the Khmer Rouge regime. Since Pol Pot's death in 1998, however, tourism and relative economic stability have revived the city and the province, and it's now ranked in the top 10 best destination lists for travelers, and it is a UNESCO World Heritage Site. The moment that Jack and Nadia stepped off the plane in Siem Reap, the heat wrapped around them like a heavy blanket. The sun was high, the air shimmered above the tarmac. A car was waiting for them outside the terminal, and Alexei quickly ushered everyone in. The drive through Siem Reap was surprisingly tranquil. Palm-lined streets were dotted with cafes and market stalls, and smiling tuk-tuk drivers calling out to passing tourists. They pulled up to a modern building just beyond the main road, tucked between a coffee shop and a bike rental shop. Inside, it was cool and quiet. A woman in her early 40s greeted them with a gentle smile. She wore a simple linen blouse and loose trousers, her dark hair swept into a low bun. This is Dara Vitya, Alexei said. She is the director of Destiny Rescue's operation here in Siem Reap. Dara greeted them warmly, her Khmer accent gentle but deliberate. Thank you for coming. Alexei has told me that you assisted in the rescue in Phnom Penh. What you did there was brave and necessary. Well, we couldn't have done it without your people, Jack replied. Dara led them to a small office filled with whiteboards, maps, and pinned photographs. We've been watching Komarov since the moment he landed, she said, gesturing to a circled image on the map. He's staying here, the Golden Sunrise Hotel, quiet, out of the way, mostly locals. That alone raised a flag. Now, based on our intel, he's already begun scouting his next shipment. From the outer districts of Siem Reap, girls are pulled from impoverished villages under the pretense of modeling jobs, restaurant work, even schooling opportunities. Jack clenched his jaw. How close are you to shutting this down? Dara looked at him steadily. We're close, but we could use your help. Your faces aren't known here yet. We want you to go into the field and observe, blend in. It may take a few days, but if we're right, it could lead us straight to the recruiters. Jack looked at Natia, who nodded. We're in. Good, Daria said, standing, because this may be our only chance to catch him before more girls disappear forever. Dara led them to a back room where maps of rural districts were spread across a large wooden table. Red pins marked several locations, villages known to be vulnerable, where poverty and desperation made family easy targets. We believe Kamarov's middlemen are making contact with parents, Dara explained, her voice tightening with quiet anger. They offer small payments, false promises. Most of the girls taken are between 12 and 16. Now their families think that they're sending them to a better life. Natia looked down at the pins. The weight of what they represented settling in her chest like stone. It's always the same lie, she murmured. Dara nodded. Tonight, we have eyes on the night market just outside of Pub Street. We've heard whispers that 2 girls were taken from there last week, and we can't move in until we have definitive proof. Alexei tapped the map. And that is where you come in. You'll blend into the crowd. You're tourists with cameras. Just keep an eye on the crowds. And if you see a handoff happening, you document it quietly, then walk away. Don't engage unless I give the signal. Well, what's the signal? Jack asked. Alexei smirked. You'll know. Trust me. Dara added, we'll have a backup team staged nearby. You'll never be alone, but we have to be careful. If Kamarov catches wind that we're onto him, he'll vanish again, and the girls with him. Natia leaned in, her voice quiet but firm. Let's end this. Later that evening, Jack, Nadia, Miguel, and Julian, they sat above Pub Street in a corner bar that looked down on the famous night market street. Music blared from loudspeakers tied to corner light posts while the street pulsed with life. Closed off to cars, the street was just full of vendors and food stalls. Well, because they were dressed like Western backpackers, Jack carried a camera slung over his shoulder, and Nadia wore a loose scarf to cover her hair, blending in among the crowd of curious travelers and locals. Miguel and Julian, why, they did their best to fit in. Occasionally, street performers would parade through the street, demonstrating techniques from the traditional Cambodian martial art called bokatar. Everyone, tourists and locals alike, would stand in a circle in the middle of the street, watching as the young men demonstrated hand-to-hand combat, wrestling, and sword fighting while the crowd just cheered them on. And it was during one of those demonstrations that Jack noticed a handoff. A tall man with a limp stood near the back of the crowd, and he was speaking to a woman clutching the arm of a very young girl. Jack subtly raised his camera and zoomed in. She doesn't look like she wants to be here, Nadia whispered. No, she doesn't, Jack said, snapping several photos. I think we just got our proof. They left the bar and wandered down the street, coming to the small bridge lit up with a big pink heart. On the other side of the small creek, the park was full of more vendors of all kinds of handcrafts. They wandered the market slowly, stopping to admire hand-woven scarves and fried banana snacks and little clay figurines of Angkor temples, but their eyes were scanning, watching for anything unusual. A man balanced atop a single bamboo pole, swaying like a reed in the wind as he juggled 3 machetes, his painted face grinning wildly. Children clapped and tossed coins into a woven basket at his feet. And a few steps away, a small group of musicians played haunting melodies on traditional Khmer instruments. The music It's both mournful and hypnotic, echoing the timeless soul of Cambodia. A barefoot girl of no more than 12 years old danced gracefully before the crowd, her hands curling in the slow, intricate gestures of Apsara dance. Her eyes never met anyone's, just floated above them, somewhere far away. Jack watched her for a moment longer than necessary. "She's good," Nadia whispered beside him. "Yeah," Jack said, his voice tight. "Too young to be here alone." Near the corner of a fabric stall, two boys performed a mock martial arts fight, blending acrobatics and laughter into their performance. A fire eater exhaled a roaring flame that lit up the crowd of cheering tourists, his face momentarily illuminated in a flickering orange, like a ghost from some ancient legend. But in every smile, Jack saw the fragility behind it. The way many of the performers darted glances at shadows, the way their joy seemed rehearsed, a veneer over something deeper. "They're not just busking," Nadia murmured. "They're surviving." Jack nodded grimly. Every single one of them could vanish tomorrow, and no one would notice. The revelry around them grew louder, the colors more vivid, but for Jack and Nadia, everything had narrowed to a single burning focus. Stop Kamarov, before another child, like the dancing girl with the faraway eyes, disappeared into darkness. Somewhere, close enough to taste the smoke and the beer-scented air, Kamarov's men were watching too. Alexei downloaded all the photographs that Jack and Nadia, Miguel and Julian had taken from the previous night. "Wow, there's a lot of proof here. Good job," he said as he printed out the last of them. Dara walked in and greeted everyone. "Good morning, everyone, and good work last night. It's definitely a step towards finding out who's responsible for the girls who are disappearing off the streets. But I want to tell you about another aspect of our work that you might not be aware of. See, the internet is quickly becoming the new brothel. Hidden behind layers of protection and perceived anonymity, predators, they feel freer than ever to pursue the most depraved tendencies, and precious children are suffering as a result. But Destiny Rescue and GCG is changing that trend. Let me explain. It was 2022, and Destiny Rescue partnered with the global counter-trafficking group, known as GCG, to create Project Scientia. GCG combines cutting-edge security materials, vital contracts, and investigative methods within Destiny Rescue's established infrastructure and rescue expertise to save online trafficking victims in Cambodia and Thailand and bring their abusers to justice. The internet is a vast labyrinth where traffickers pursue, exploit, conceal their victims, but we've just added another bloodhound to the team. This new program, dubbed Scientia, is much more than just top-tier software. With a full staff of highly trained personnel, it's a full-service investigative team. Full-service team, unlike any other. We're trained by law enforcement agency officials on what to look for in the world of online trafficking. While police can use the program with a warrant for more in-depth investigations, why the majority of Scientia's work is accomplished using only publicly accessible, legal, and most importantly, court-admissible means. While we can't get into all the details of how the system works without compromising its capabilities, I can tell you this much. This new system finds online traffickers and victims alike with incredible efficiency, building a body of evidence to take down the perpetrators while helping the police rescue the kids faster than ever, all without violating personal privacy laws. Our new system cuts months off of investigations. The new software uses AI technology, and it sorts through hundreds of thousands of internet images more rapidly than any people ever could, searching for child pornography, sexual abuse material. It compares these images to identifiers supplied by the National Center for the Missing and Exploited Children. It singles out images that might show instances of child exploitation. What's even more impressive is that this tool has the capability to scan peer-to-peer networks. Those perps who don't use regular internet channels but instead set up networks between individual computers or maybe through private servers where they can hide their criminal activities. Well, thanks to this new software, offenders are quickly losing which they once thought was safe places to share their videos and their pictures. Once it has tracked down suspicious images, the system works to identify the person behind the profile. Yeah, it produces the offender's IP address, which is essentially the unique code for a personal computer or a smartphone. And with this code, officers have everything they need, including a physical address, to start investigating the person behind the material. And if the police request it, Scientia's team members on the ground can also set up physical surveillance on targets from public locations, tightening the net even further. Well, despite all these powerful tools, we never lose sight of our mission, rescuing the children. The Scientia program empowers police and social workers with training and development from an internationally licensed forensic interviewer and child psychologist to ensure the interview process for rescued kids doesn't cause any additional trauma because they're so broken and sensitive. Once all the data gathering and case building are complete, our end goal is always the well-being of the survivors. Thanks to Scientia, police can locate and rescue online victims like never before. And because the program builds such a strong body of evidence, traffickers and offenders can be prosecuted to the fullest extent of the law, ensuring that they can't harm children anymore. Miguel asked him, "Well, that's incredible. I know software development's expensive. How do you pay for this and the rescues as well, plus all the aftercare programs you provide for the rescued women and children, and all the training programs and rescue homes?" Well, we rely on donations. At least 82% of every dollar spent is used for these programs that benefit the children we defend. 8.6% is used for fundraising, and 9.4% is used for management and infrastructure. We have a great team of volunteers and a really strong organization. But it's thanks to people like you who believe in this cause that we can make a difference. We like to say that our donors are the ones who pay the bill to the innkeeper, or paying the freedom bill that transforms these kids' lives forever. We believe we've been rescued in order to rescue others. It's as simple as that. Now, why don't the four of you go visit some of our beautiful sites here in Angkor and let Alexi and I run this new data through our system. We can meet up later for dinner and make plans for what's next. Now, our driver's happy to be your tour guide. He's one of our volunteers. And with that, the day began. The morning light painted the sky in soft hues of lavender and rose as Jack and Nadia, Miguel, and Julian stood at the edge of the reflecting pool outside Angkor Wat. The ancient temple, shrouded in mist, rose like a dream from another world. Its 5 lotus-shaped towers reaching towards the heavens, etched against the slowly brightening sky. It was silent, but for the murmuring of birds and the low hum of gathering tourists. Inside, they wandered through the galleries, intricate carvings, scenes from Hindu epics and mythologies unfurling across the stone. Nadia paused in front of a wall depicting the churning of the ocean of milk, marveling at the detail on the celestial beings and the demons locked in a cosmic struggle. Miguel traced the grooves in the stone absently, humbled by the artistry carved over 900 years ago, without modern tools. And Julian stood in reverence, silence, at a headless Buddha statue, incense curling upward from its base, like a prayer into the still air. "Why are there no heads?" he asked. There are virtually no original Buddha heads in the entire complex of temples. They managed to stay with their bodies despite religious changes and wars for thousands or more years. Then came the Khmer Rouge, who took over the country, killed 2/3 of its population, and cut off the Buddha heads to sell on the black market for cash. Hundreds, if not thousands, of heads and sometimes whole statues and other antiquities were sold to buy arms. And since then, pillagers have taken anything that was left. Now there are guards to oversee the temples, but they're paid poorly. If you're only making the equivalent of, say, $8 a day and somebody offers you $20 to take a piece of a carving, it's pretty easy to look the other way. And that piece of carving that cost you $20 might bring in thousands on the black market. Throughout the temples, you'll see beautiful, scantily clad women carved into the stone walls. These were the Asparas, water spirits, came from the sea. Celestial nymphs who are sensuous, graceful females which adorn the temple walls and are amongst the most beautiful example of bas-relief carving. Jack felt a calm he hadn't known in weeks settle over him. The smell of the earth and the ancient stone mixed with incense, the distant chant of monks echoing softly through the galleries. It was hard to imagine that just hours from here, darkness thrived under men like Kamarov. But here, in this sacred place, the world felt briefly pure and eternal. They climbed steep staircases to reach the highest levels of the temple, where they could see the jungle stretching out endlessly in all directions. Nadia stood at the edge, the wind in her hair. The whole of Cambodia laid out like a tapestry. "It's incredible," she whispered. "I feel like we've stepped outside of time." Jack looked at her, then back at the towers behind them and nodded. If the world has a soul, this is one of the places you can still feel it. As they descended once more into the lower corridors and out into the brightening morning, none of them said much. Angkor Wat had spoken in its own language, one older and deeper than words, and its message lingered quietly in their hearts. They wandered from temple to temple throughout the complex, each one more breathtaking than the last. Bayon, with its towering stone faces, smiled serenely in every direction. Built in the late 12th or early 13th century, was the state temple of the king Jayavarman VII. In all, there were 216 gigantic faces on the temple's towers. Next was Ta Prohm, where the jungle still clutched at the walls with the roots, like ancient fingers. Nature and architecture intertwined here, locked in an eternal embrace that was both beautiful and haunting. The silence was broken only by the occasional whisper of tourists and the soft, distant flutter of birds and chatter of monkeys. At Ta Prohm, Nadia paused beneath the gnarled roots of a massive silk cotton tree that wound its way through the crumbling stone like a guardian spirit refusing to let go. She touched the warm surface of the wall, feeling the tension between ruin and resilience. "This place reminds me of Cambodia itself," she said quietly. "Devastated, reclaimed, still standing." Ta Prohm was built without mortar, and after it was abandoned, trees took root in the loosened stones. The trees growing out of the ruins and the jungle surrounding made it one of the most beautiful and popular temples. In 1992, it was placed on UNESCO World Heritage List. The group spent hours wandering through sunlit courtyards and shadowed corridors, their footsteps echoing in empty spaces once alive with a ritual. They lit incense sticks at small altars tucked in corners of the temple ruins, bowing their heads not out of habit or relief, but out of deep respect for all that those stones had seen. It felt appropriate, even necessary after the heaviness of the past few days. As the sun dipped low behind the ancient spires of Angkor Wat, casting long golden shadows across the worn stone, Jack, Nadia, Miguel, and Julian sat together in the quiet of their guest house courtyard, sipping sweet Thai iced tea. Lanterns swayed gently in the evening breeze, and the sounds of the bustling Siem Reap streets echoed in the distance. And for a brief moment, it felt like time had paused, giving them space to breathe, to reflect, to heal. The visit to Angkor Wat had offered a kind of balm to the weight of their mission. A reminder that even in a place that had known centuries of war, conquest, hardship, beauty still thrived, and memories endured through it all. They had come face to face with unspeakable darkness, both in Cambodia's painful past and in the hidden evil of Komarov's trafficking operations. But they had also seen resilience, courage, beauty, the human spirit quietly enduring like the roots clinging to temple stone. I want to thank you, listeners, for joining us on this journey. The past 4 episodes have taken us deep into Cambodia's soul, its history, its heartbreak, and its beauty. And while the Wolfman Chronicles tells fictional tales, the truths behind the story are very real. Human trafficking is not a distant problem. It's happening right now. But there is hope. Organizations like Destiny Rescue are doing the work on the front line, and they need our support. If this episode moved you, please consider visiting destinyrescue.org to learn how you can help. Share this episode with friends or family and talk about what you've heard. Don't let these stories stay in the dark. We'll be back next week with more from Cambodia, more mystery, more danger, and more heart. Until then, stay safe, stay aware, and never stop fighting for the light.